There are ships that vanish at sea. That is a tragedy. But what is more terrifying is when the ship does not vanish, when only the crew disappears. On December 4th, 1872, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the merchant ship Dei Gratia spotted another vessel. It was drifting, strangely. Its sails were up but torn, and it moved with no clear course. The captain of the Dei Gratia gave the order to approach. They hailed the ship. No answer. They fired a signal. Still, only silence. Finally, a small boarding party was sent over. They climbed onto the deck and found themselves completely alone. There was no one. Not a single soul. No captain, no crew, no sign of life. On board, everything was intact. There was enough food and water for 6 months. The cargo in the hold, worth thousands of dollars, was untouched. The crew's personal belongings were still neatly packed in their cabins. Only one thing was missing: a single lifeboat. And 10 people, including the captain, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter, had vanished into thin air. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in maritime history. A mystery that has baffled investigators for 150 years. And the answer might be more disturbing than any theory you've ever heard. To understand what happened, we must first understand the ship itself. Before she was the Mary Celeste, she was the Amazon, and she was unlucky. Built in Nova Scotia in 1861, her first captain fell suddenly ill and died on her maiden voyage. On her next trip, she collided with another ship in the English Channel, and after that, she ran aground in a storm. Her owners, one after another, met with misfortune or financial ruin. By 1868, the ship was repaired, sold, and given a new name: Mary Celeste. As if a new name could wash away the past. In 1872, the ship was owned by a consortium, and her captain was Benjamin Spooner Briggs. Briggs was a 37-year-old respected man. He was a teetotaler, a devout Christian, and a master sailor. He trusted this ship so much that on this fateful voyage he brought his family, his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. With them was a crew of 7, all experienced, all with good records. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. In her hold was a special cargo: 1,701 barrels of industrial-grade alcohol. This is a critical detail. The weather was fine. The crew was good. Everything seemed set for a routine journey. No one could have known it would be their last. We return to December 4th, 1872. The Dei Gratia, on its own journey from New York to Gibraltar, spots the Mary Celeste about 400 miles off the Azores. The captain of the Dei Gratia immediately knew something was wrong. He knew Captain Briggs. They were friends. They had even had dinner together in New York just before they both set sail. Morehouse's men boarded the Mary Celeste. The scene they found was stranger than the silence. The ship was wet. There was over 3 feet of water in the hold, but the ship was still entirely seaworthy. The bilge pump was operational. The sails were torn as if ripped by a strong gale, but the items in the cabins were orderly. Mrs. Briggs's small organ was still standing. Sophia's toys were still on her bed. The only things missing, besides the lifeboat, were the ship's papers, the compass, and the chronometer. And then they found the ship's log. The last entry was made at 5 a.m. on November 25th, 10 full days before the ship was found. That entry showed the Mary Celeste over 400 miles away from its current position, and
that everything was all normal. What happened in those 10 days? Why would a veteran captain like Briggs order an evacuation from a perfectly good ship, putting his wife and child in a tiny, fragile lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic? The crew of the Dei Gratia split up. A few men stayed to sail the Mary Celeste. The others sailed the Dei Gratia. Together, they brought both ships to Gibraltar to claim the salvage money. They thought they had done a good deed. They had no idea their nightmare was just beginning. When the Mary Celeste arrived in Gibraltar, it immediately became a crime scene. The case was handed to a man named Frederick Solly Flood, the Attorney General of Gibraltar. And Solly Flood did not believe in accidents. He believed in foul play. From the start, Solly Flood had a theory: murder. And his number one suspect, the crew of the Dei Gratia. Solly Flood thought it was too much of a coincidence that Captain Morehouse happened to find his friend's ship. He believed Morehouse and his men had boarded the Mary Celeste, murdered everyone, and invented the ghost ship story to claim the salvage money. Solly Flood's investigators scoured the ship. They found a sword in Captain Briggs's cabin. On the blade were stains they claimed were blood. They also found blood stains on the ship's railing. Solly Flood constructed a grim scenario. The crew of the Mary Celeste had broken into the alcohol cargo, gotten drunk, mutinied, and murdered Briggs and his family. Then they killed the remaining officers and fled in the lifeboat. Or the crew of the Dei Gratia had done it all. The inquiry lasted 3 months. Newspapers around the world picked up the story, spinning wild tales of pirates, sea monsters, and curses. But as the evidence was analyzed, it all fell apart. The blood on the sword? It was rust. The blood on the railing? Also rust. Or perhaps paint. The valuable cargo was untouched. Money and jewelry in the cabins were untouched. What kind of pirate takes nothing? And the mutiny theory? Captain Briggs and his officers were known teetotalers. Furthermore, the industrial alcohol was not drinkable. It was poison. In the end, the court could not charge anyone. They awarded the Dei Gratia crew their salvage money, but it was a laughably small amount, only 1,700 pounds, a fraction of what the ship and cargo were worth. It was a slap in the face. The court essentially said, "We can't prove you're guilty, but we still don't trust you." Captain Morehouse and his crew were ruined. They had saved a ship only to be branded as potential murderers by the world. The Mary Celeste was repaired and put into service again, but the curse, it seemed, remained. It changed owners 17 times over the next 11 years. Finally, in 1885, a captain deliberately sailed it into a reef in Haiti in an insurance fraud scheme. The ghost ship was finally laid to rest, but the mystery of the 10 vanished souls endured. So, what really happened? We can dismiss the wild theories. It was not a sea monster, not aliens, not the Bermuda Triangle, the ship was nowhere near it, not pirates, as the cargo was intact, not a mutiny, as there were no signs of violence. We are left with only a few possibilities, and they all center on one thing: those 1,701 barrels of industrial-grade alcohol. This is the most plausible theory, supported by historians and oceanographers. Of those 1,701 barrels, it was discovered when the cargo was unloaded in Genoa that 9 of them were empty. These 9 barrels were made of red oak, which is a more porous wood than the white oak used for the rest. The theory is, a small amount of alcohol leaked from these 9 barrels. Fumes built up in the sealed cargo hold. The temperature changed, the pressure built. Captain Briggs, a teetotaler, perhaps unfamiliar with this volatile cargo, became worried. There may have been a sound, Not a massive explosion, but a small boom. A sudden release of pressure that blew the cargo hatch open. To Captain Briggs, this may have seemed like a warning that the entire ship was about to detonate. Panicked and responsible for his wife and small child, he made a split-second decision. He ordered a temporary evacuation. They opened the hatches to ventilate the ship. This would explain the water in the hold. They hastily gathered the important papers, the compass, and the chronometer. Then, all 10 of them got into the single lifeboat. They did not intend to abandon the Mary Celeste forever. They likely tied a long rope, a tow line, from the lifeboat to the main ship, planning to wait at a safe distance for the explosion danger to pass.
They paid out the line, and they waited. And then, tragedy struck. A sudden gust of wind hit. The tow line snapped. Or perhaps, as the Mary Celeste sails, which were already set, caught the wind, the ship lurched forward, breaking the rope. In minutes, the massive, empty Mary Celeste began to drift, faster than the small, overcrowded lifeboat could row. 10 people, including a 2-year-old child, could only watch helplessly as their only safe haven slowly sailed away over the horizon. We will never know their fate. They could have starved, died of exposure, or been swamped by the next storm. No trace was ever found. The mystery of the Mary Celeste is not about ghosts or curses. It is a human tragedy. A story of a good captain who made what was perhaps the wrong decision, but a logical one at the time, to protect his family. The most terrifying truth of the Mary Celeste is not what happened. It is the silence, the emptiness, the horror of realizing you are adrift in the middle of the ocean and your lifeline is sailing away, further and further, taking all of your hope with it. The ship wasn't haunted. It was simply left behind. And for 150 years, the absence of those 10 souls has told a story more terrifying than any ghost.